I really want this channel to be a place where comic book fans can come together and celebrate this timeless medium. And for the most part, I think we will get there. But today, we relive heartbreak. The year is 2016, and I just walked out of Batman v Superman with my friend. We sat in the car in utter silence. Not the Infinity War kind of silence where your soul is still processing what happened, but the kind of silence that comes with pure, unfiltered disappointment. Zack Snyder had just killed Superman and I felt nothing. Not sadness, not shock, not even mild concern, just indifference. And that was the worst part. I was confused, angry. This was their one shot to make the death of Superman matter, and they fumbled it like Mark Sanchez in 2012. They made the death of Superman feel empty. They made the death of Superman feel like nothing. If instead of Tony Stark snapping away Thanos in Endgame, Iron Man just got crushed by a giant space poopy from Joe Dirt. That's how embarrassingly meaningless Superman's death felt in that movie. And it's not like I'm some big Henry Cavill hater either. I loved Man of Steel. The movie for me was the first time it really clicked that Superman is an alien, first and foremost. Sure, he gets his humanity from Ma and Pa Kent, but he has to choose to embrace it. And we see him wrestle with the idea of, are these people really worth saving? And then once he finally decides, he's all in. And remember this idea of all in, we're going to come back to that when we talk about the War World Saga. But still sitting in the car, in my enraged state, one thought consumed me. You blew it! Because this moment was wasted, if Doomsday ever shows up in the DCU again, both comic fans and casual moviegoers were going to see this coming from a mile away. Superman's death shouldn't be about taking him off the board, it should be about what he inspires in us. Killing Superman should send a ripple effect through the entire DCU. It should test the world and it should make us ask questions like, what does a world without Superman look like? Who steps up? Hopefully John Kent. And that, my friends, brings me to the present day. The other day someone asked, what are the best Superman comics? And instantly, one came to mind, the War World Saga by Phillip Kennedy Johnson. This arc is bleak, oppressive, soul-crushing in the best way. This is Superman at his purest, stripped of his power, trapped in a hopeless battle, defending those who cannot defend themselves, those who don't even want a savior. He's weakened, he's dying, and yet he never gives up. That is how you bring Superman to the brink of death. And this got my little noodle cooking. If one of the big wigs at Warner Bros. Sent me an email like, Matt, David's contract is up in the next few movies, we need to send him out like a hero, how would you do it? The only proper send-off I can think of is sending him to War World. So my pitch would be a War World inspired arc where Superman fights an impossible battle, loses and died, not because he's overpowered, but because he chooses to sacrifice himself to free an entire civilization. And if you're not familiar with the War World Saga, let me explain why this is one of the greatest modern superhero stories and why I think it's the perfect way to explore his limits, his morality, and his ultimate sacrifice. Warworld is essentially a gladiator planet ruled by Mongol. Think Sakaar from Thor Ragnarok, but up the poverty level by 1,000%. On Warworld, the weak are enslaved and only the strongest survive. They have a saying, so say the dead. Because on Warworld, the belief is that when you win a battle against someone, their soul becomes yours, it becomes your reward, and it becomes a link in your chain. The longer the chain, the greater the respect and the greater the power, and Mongol holds all chains on Warworld. It's a system designed to celebrate enslavement. And Superman obviously refuses to kill, so he is seen as the weakest among them. Also in this story, Superman is depowered from radiation poisoning, and Warworld's engines actually create red sun energy, one of Superman's biggest weaknesses, so he can't just punch his way out of this one, and he's fighting against an entire culture that sees him as weakness. He's forced to become a warrior, a rebel leader, and a symbol of defiance. And after the initial confrontation with Mongol, Superman loses and he gets thrown in the cells with the other slaves. Midnighter returns later to try and break him out, and he's like, hey, we gotta scram. And Superman refuses to leave these people. And before Midnighter leaves him there, he says, are these people really worth more than us? And Superman just says, no, not more, but not less. And this, to me, is the heart of Superman. If someone were to ask, who is Superman to their core? This line right here is it. He sees value in every single life form. As the story continues, Superman leads a full-scale revolution, rallying the enslaved against Mongol. He's battered, broken, and on the verge of death, but instead of giving up, he gives everything. Unfortunately, Mongol adds one more chain to his link, the heaviest soul the universe has to offer, so say the dead. If this were a movie, this is where Superman would make his final stand, not to save himself, but to ensure that War World becomes free. Superman does not die in the comics at this point. I think this just makes for a great template to showcase who Superman is, build meaning behind his name and his character before you take him out of the movie franchise. And I think this is how you make his death matter, because it's not just about him dying, it's about what he stands for, it's about what he leaves behind, it's about who he inspires. Superman has died a few times in the comics and in the media, and I think it's lost a little bit of its oomph, it's lost a little bit of its impact. I think if the DCU has to do it, if it's done right, I think his death could be the most powerful moment in the DCU. And I do want to say, if you've made it this far, I don't want Superman to die in the DCU. I don't want that at all, and I'm not advocating for this. Honestly, I think this was just a perfect excuse to talk about one of my favorite Superman stories. And for a lot of people, All-Star Superman is their favorite Superman comic, but for me, it's the War World Saga. I'd be curious, what is your favorite Superman story that flies under the radar, that means a lot to you, that also defines who Superman is to you? Thanks.